Hello everybody, this is Brendan, and today I'm going to be going over a hair demo. Now, the first hair demo I did, I was not happy with. It was I can bring it on screen here. It was like this, and that's pretty understated. That's barely any hair. That's not a fun, and it's not even done very well. I'm sorry, guys. I made a pretty shitty hair demo, but I made a second hair demo for you guys, and I'm going to walk you through the PSD. Of course, the layered PSD is going to be up on Google Drive right next to this video file. And if you have any questions, of course, email me or ask a question on the message board. All right, so let's take a look at the process for hair. Of course, I did not get this hair. This is a hair that I found online. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's just turn all these layers off and look at the reference. And I actually went on Pinterest. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Pinterest, I don't know what you're doing. It's 2015, and Pinterest is the most amazing thing for artists to find reference ever. Go on Pinterest. You can sign in with Facebook. It's awesome. I use it all the time. One of the cool things, in particular for something like hairstyles, is that a lot of times it'll have like tutorials of how they accomplish the hairstyle. So for weird wraps and buns and updos and things like that, especially for like ladies' hair, they'll show the step-by-step process. And I feel like when you're painting something, again, you know, to know how something is constructed, to understand the design logic behind it it's gonna make you paint it a lot better. So go on Pinterest, find this. This was some wedding hairstyle, very over the top. This is not for everyday style, but I figure for a hair demo, you know, this is a perfect type of style for that. Now, obviously, the lady here has black hair, and I kind of made like a brownish, medium brown hair in the way I painted it. But, all right, so I took a reference. First thing, using free transform, Control-T, to size it up, and all I did is I reduced the opacity to, let's say, like 50%, and I brought it over the top of my other reference. So the actual photo that I took is underneath, and then the reference is on top. And I'm just kind of matching up the ear position and the cheek position, and just about getting the rotation and scale right on the reference on top. And then I can just turn that off and paint the hairstyle. The first thing, of course, being the line drawing. So the line drawing, the way I approach this is that I look for the clusters. And the type of brush I'm using, you know, you can use any type of drawing brush. I'm actually in Blur's Good Brush set here. And I like a lot of the brushes there. You can use anything you want, but I'm paying particular attention to the clusters of hair. And you're going to want to find the clumps of it. Because naturally hair clusters, so don't go for strands right away. You're going to see I'm painting a couple here, but it's not really, I'm not trying to interpret the strands. I'm trying to look at the direction of the way the hair folds. This hair has been curled, so we get these like awesome S-curves down here, but also it's half updo. So we see like this top half, there's almost like this helmet or shell, and then it kind of falls down and does this cool like S-curve on the side. And again, I'm mouse drawing, so if you notice my lines are all wonky, don't judge me. All right, so just going through, and I also went through at like a 30% opacity, just kind of hint at where the shadows are, reinforce where the different kind of clumps or clusters of hair are. But really what you should be getting is a good sense of the skull and the form underneath, where the ear pokes out, you know, how it folds around the neck and drapes over the shoulders, and really just starting to get the volume of hair, almost like a sculpture through the drawing. And you don't have to be too tight. We're going to paint over all these lines anyway. These are just kind of a blueprint for what we're going for. But please don't bust out the hairbrush and start rendering strands right away. That's just like number one mistake to make with painting hair. And I know hairbrushes are fun, but we got to build a good foundation first. All right, so the next thing I do is I go in and I have a base here. So I'm going to actually just kind of fade this down in opacity, this white layer back here. And I'm just sampling again from my color palette, just kind of like these dark browns in here. And I'm going through with a couple colors to really give it a bit of color variety, reinforce the idea that there's really dark recessed parts and that there's lighter parts. Since we have a red background, we can really cheat the red in the hair and everything, and make it feel harmonious with everything else. The next thing I do is I build up midtones and deep darks. So, this base is a good approximation. It's kind of a shadowy color, but I want to restate my darks and restart my midtones. And one thing is that my brush size is pretty big. I'm still using this kind of brush. But if we look, this is about the size of the brush that I'm using, and I'm just, being very careful with the way I touch the Wacom pen to the tablet. And I do vary the brush size a little bit in here, but I'm not going in and doing strokes, doing hair follicles at this point. It's still groups of hair, but vary up the width a little bit, because some clusters are going to be a lot larger. Some of them are going to be smaller strands clumped together. All right, and the next thing I do is actually on top of my lines layer, I will paint lights. So this one is a screen layer blend mode on top. And I'm going to go ahead and turn off the white background here. So the lights is actually, I go through with a soft round. So actually, this is where I break out Photoshop's soft round pressure size. Everybody has it. And what I'll do is I will, with the screen layer, I will often, and again, I'm mouse painting, so please don't mouse paint for hair. I will brush in at like a opacity that's like 50 to 100%, and then what I will do is I will erase with something that is like 30 to 50%, and really that's what we're getting, is we're getting a tapering of highlights, and that's the effect that we want to get. And I'm doing this over my lines layer. So my lines layer is here, and this is the first time I'm painting on top of the lines layer. And we can still, you're going to see some of these lines show through in the end, but overall we're going to soften the look of this a bit. So this is where we're starting to really build up the layer. And you notice we're approaching hair strands, but we're still not there yet. We're still looking at kind of clusters or clumps of it, and we're still maintaining the sculptural look, using the blueprint of the line art. Okay, and the next one is just paint out lines, and that is just going with that soft round pressure size and a 30 to 50% opacity, and you can see all I'm doing is I'm just softening the lines, especially around the silhouette and all those strands, just all the really rough, loose, scratchy drawing look of it. We're just trying to soften that out a little bit, and that already we have something. We have a really solid foundation to paint hair with here. And that's the block-in phase. So all of that is in 5 layers here, from drawing through a good kind of like, I would say 3 to 5 value structure here. And that's the block-in. We can do a value test on it just to check. And right now, we're going to notice that you're going to see me fix this in a couple parts here. But as I'm compositing things on, I'm looking and I'm seeing that the levels. Well, I had already done a couple fixes here. To make sure to blend the hairstyle in, because I felt that the face overall, it's really, really light and washed out compared to the hair. So I'm doing work to make the values kind of match as I'm compositing the two together when I'm painting. So one of them was just, again, like just darkening some of the shadow areas. And then as well with the ear lighting, since the hair is behind here, we're not going to have this kind of subsurface scattering or the reddish glow as the light comes through the ear. When she was bald, of course, we're going to have that. We're going to be able to see through the skin, but because there's hair back there, we can just kind of blot that out with some nice neutrally browns. All right, so after the block-in, we're going to go to the texture part. I'm just going to turn all this off again. So duplicate your hair block-in layer, merge it together. The next thing I did is a levels adjustment layer. Let's see what I'm doing here. I'm taking the white slider on the input, and I'm just cranking it over to the bell curve, so just over to the left to where it starts. And then if we look at what I'm actually doing, is I'm just painting again with that airbrush, that soft round, just reinforcing those light areas. We can see kind of restating those softly. The next thing I do is now you can get the hairbrush. You guys should have several hairbrushes. I can throw in a couple from the Good Brush set, and hairbrushes are fun, but again, the way you apply it is really, really important. So we can see here, And my monitor colors, I don't know how this video is going to look for you guys, but my monitor right now is the dark values turn to black very quickly. So depending on your monitor quality, you may be able to see the kind of medium dark values going into darker values here, or it may just look like a black blob here. Hopefully you guys have a nice quality monitor. You can look at this, but basically I'm going in with a a normal layer and a screen layer. And I'm using a combination of a very tiny soft round brush for some of the strands, for like individual strands like this, and then also the hairbrush for like clusters, like in here. And I think this is a good example to take a look at, is the way the hair is looking in here. So here's before, we have shadow, and you can see I'm just loosely brushing in with the hairbrush, and then we have light. Let me go ahead with the light here. I'm just going to duplicate this layer. I'm going to go ahead and sample this, and let's go ahead and look with the hairbrush. And I'll throw these up for you guys. They're from Blur's Good Brush. I gave you the whole set a couple weeks ago. It's kind of my go-to brush set. I've been trying to use the brushes you guys have for most of the semester, just so you guys can follow along nice and easy. So what I do in this process is I use that roadmap that I made with the drawing, and I'm using that lasso trick we talked about, and I'm basically lassoing off clusters. So it'll contain the hairbrush, because the one thing about the hairbrush is that it's easy to just make a mess everywhere. This is a texture brush, and so it doesn't sculpt very well. So this is understanding the limitations of each of the brushes. We're not going to be able to get good hair texture from some of the more painterly brushes, but they provide this fantastic textural foundation for us to work with, for us to do this part. So I'm going to make this lasso, and it'll retain the kind of the form that I've sculpted out already. And again, painting with the mouse here, I'm going to go, we'll say at 50% opacity, choose a good size here, and then I'm going to erase with the mouse, and there we go. It's hair. So really hitting up those highlights, and you notice the pattern. I'm also going to do this. The pattern of highlights is really, really important. Notice this ring shape that happens. Find the pattern that the highlights make based on the light source. Based on the highlight in our eye, and as well the angle of the light, we know that there is a light source generally coming down at an angle, pretty standard angle down here. So what that's going to do is, as the hair curves around, we're going to have this section of highlight across, and what that's going to do is it's going to kind of form this pattern. So we're going to be very cognizant to look for that. And as well down here, it happens, it's not going to happen quite as much, it's especially as it just gets flowing, going everywhere, but especially around the skull, because of the skull underneath and the dome shape, there tends to be nice patterns of highlights in these ring shapes in the hair. So really, look for those. And again, the less you do, like there is tons of patches of midtones and shadows, and it really helps the light area just to sell the light area. So go through, lasso everything off, go through, paint with the hairbrush, and then erase with an airbrush on the edges so we get that nice tapering, reinforcing that nice highlight shape. All right, the next thing I do is after going through and very patiently on both the shadow texture and light texture, you can see that I'm using the shadow texture more down here just to kind of give some nice textural detail there. I'm going to go through and paint the hairline, and what I do for the hairline, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate this layer and try to mouse paint this to recreate this. I use my smudge tool, so sometimes it'll be the blur tool. We can use it as a smudge tool here. Sample all layers should be checked, and the strength can vary. Because I'm using the mouse here, it's going to be a lot stronger, but basically I can kind of pull, and be careful about making really weird errant brush strokes that just like look like dripping or whatever, but you can really easily, just kind of pull the hair follicles, so get this kind of like hairline And then what I'll do is also erase with like a low opacity brush. So basically just softly, erase away that kind of smudging just a little bit. And the effect that has is just, it looks more like the hairline. So instead of having a hard brush, like, we don't want to make it look like just like a cap, there's a soft transition where the hair follicles are seen in the hairline, and we want to try and mimic that. And I find that using the smudge tool and then just gently erasing will get that fairly quickly. Last thing, of course, I do is miscellaneous hairs. So you're going to see me, even the eyebrows a little bit, because the eyebrows were pretty poorly done from last week. It wasn't really focusing on them. And even still, they're really rough. But whatever, this isn't about eyebrows. So you're going to see me do a few things here. One, I just darkened up the highlights with this, just using a big, soft, round airbrush. As well, you'll see on the silhouette, and hair really, something that really sells the hair or any form, remember, is the silhouette. Silhouette is so important, and there's going to be, in any hairstyle, there's going to be these little errant hairs. And again, I'm using a hard edge round brush here, and I'm just, gesturally putting in some hairs around the silhouette that kind of don't conform to the clusters. And don't go too crazy with this, because if you do a bunch of these, it's just gonna make the person look like a crazy cat lady or a crazy cat dude who just is homeless or something. So don't do that. But just a few go a very long way. And as well here, I wasn't very happy. I really like this section of hair, but I definitely didn't like this section of hair before. I thought it was a little bit messy, so I went through with the smudge tool, and I actually cleaned that up in there. So you can, again, use a smudge tool, sample all layers. It's a really great way for fur and hair to really get that nice, smooth, kind of blended effect almost, that sheen to hair. Yeah, and that is it for the texture. The next thing I did was shiny. Ooh, shiny. This is the fun layer. I really like this one. So I basically added a rim light on this side, a nice kind of reddish rim light, and that's also popping this side of the face. One thing I wasn't very happy about with the previous portrait is that this side of the face blends into the background value as opposed to in the photo reference. So I know it's kind of lazy, but I threw a rim light over on this side just to kind of pull the edge, the silhouette out over here. I also tossed in a rim light over here with a little bit cooler color. And this is just something where, again, I'm just kind of scribbling in with a smaller round brush and then gently erasing away with a larger airbrush. And then even going back in with a low opacity airbrush to just get kind of like bigger sections. And, don't go too heavy with this. Our main light source is here. So whatever you do for reflected light, make sure or rim light, make sure it doesn't take away from the main light source and its brightness, because it's really, really easy. It's really easy to do something like this and just outline the form, and that's not good. That's not how light actually reacts. Think about the planes. Think about how it's hitting this plane more than that plane, and really, really kind of like paint the flow of light on. Last thing I did was something called bloom on a color dodge. So I actually took like something that was like yellowy gold, a little bit of bluish purple, and a little bit of red, and faded the opacity down. So we can see at 100% what it's doing here, and then I faded it down so it's a little bit lower. But what it's doing is, again, it's just kind of blending all the colors together, and the goal of this is just to kind of lighten up these values in here, but also to, just kind of provide this nice washing of light over the whole thing and really help the compositing. And that's definitely what this was about. It's just like unifying the lighting. Okay, so I took this whole thing and I made a polish layer. So I duplicated it. And of course I did my depth of field trick. So I duplicated it, merged it. And so we have our sharp layer here. And then we have our blur layer underneath. So just a Gaussian blur, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And get a good amount here, and then have the sharp layer on top, make a layer mask, and then especially like back here we can see with the layer mask turned on and off what that's doing around the outside here, and especially around the outside. If this is like we're getting like a photography effect with this, is that things are going to be blurrier towards the edges, and it makes the sharp more like things have more of a payoff, like the sharper areas when things are more blurry around the outside or around forms that are away. The next thing I did was I just did a little bit of more vignette, which is basically darkening of edges and corners. It's a hue saturation layer, darker, less saturated, and we can see that that's coming in from the top and the bottom just with some gradients here. Focusing in on the face here, Next thing I did was just a little bit of light touch-ups. I wanted to polish up a couple minor things in the face, eyes and lips in particular. And then as well, there's a couple areas in the skin that I just, around the edge, we can see the forehead, under the eye, the ear, the chin, where it was just a little bit sloppy from compositing the hair in. And I just wanted to clean those up. And last thing was I lightened this because I noticed when I saved this out on other monitors, it was looking really dark. So I just lightened it up with this levels layer here. And that's it. Again, you can always check things with this value test as you go. But that's the hair demo. I think it turned out a lot better than the first one for you guys. Hopefully it helps out. Again, if you have any questions, please email me or respond in the forums. And I hope you find this helpful. Good luck, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thank you.